The Dutch language is the third most widely spoken Germanic language, after English and German. It's the official language of the Netherlands and one of the official languages of Belgium, where it's the native language of around 60% of the population, mainly in the northern region of Flanders. No, not this Flanders, this Flanders. In Dutch,
Vlaanderen.
The history of the Netherlands and Belgium are closely linked, and they were under the same rule at several points in their history, including the United Kingdom of the Netherlands from 1815 to 1830. But then the Belgian Revolution resulted in the creation of the Kingdom of Belgium. At first it had only one official language, French, even though a large percentage of its population was Flemish. In Dutch,
Vlaams.
But Dutch eventually became an official language alongside French in Belgium, and the only official language in the region of Flanders, except for the Brussels capital region, which is bilingual. That official language is Standard Dutch, but Belgian Standard Dutch, which has some slight differences from the Standard Dutch used in the Netherlands, including some differences in vocabulary, but it's Standard Dutch. But as in the Netherlands, numerous spoken dialects are used in Flanders, which can differ widely from Standard Dutch and from each other. These dialects are collectively referred to as Flemish, or
Vlaams.
Flemish speakers often speak these dialects with family, friends, and other people who speak the same or a similar dialect. But it's the 21st century, and there are lots of people who don't stay in the same town forever. They move to other parts of the country and talk to speakers of other dialects. You might assume that Flemish people speak Standard Dutch in these situations, but that's not exactly the case. A variety of Flemish has emerged called Tussentaal, which literally means between language, or interlanguage. It's a semi-standardized, informal way of speaking that includes some elements of Standard Dutch and some elements of dialect, especially Brabantian dialects. While older generations grew up speaking their local dialect as their main spoken language, these days many people use Tussentaal as their main spoken language. Tussentaal is also the main form of spoken Flemish used in television shows and the like, except in formal broadcasts like the news, which use Belgian Standard Dutch. But Tussentaal is not spoken exactly the same everywhere and by everyone. It differs a little bit depending on the person and locality. In the Netherlands, many dialects are still spoken too, but Standard Dutch has been continuously growing as a spoken language of daily use, and is often used in situations when Tussentaal would be used in Belgium. So let's compare the way Dutch people generally speak Standard Dutch in their everyday lives with the way Flemish people speak Tussentaal in their everyday lives. Pronunciation. There are some differences in pronunciation between Dutch Dutch and Flemish, though it's important to note that dialects in the southern part of the Netherlands are often similar to Flemish dialects spoken in Flanders. One major difference is the pronunciation of the sound represented by G and CH. In the Netherlands, it's the so-called hard G, G. This is a voiceless uvular fricative. In Flanders, it's the so-called soft G, either a voiced or voiceless velar fricative, R or H, which doesn't sound as guttural as the hard G, H. And the letter combination CH always indicates the voiceless H, regardless of position. The word for good, in Netherlands,
Goed.
And in Flanders,
Goed.
The word for glass, in Netherlands,
Glas.
And in Flanders.
Glas.
The word for laugh, in Netherlands,
Lachen.
And in Flanders.
Lachen.
The word for school, in Netherlands,
School.
And in Flanders,
School.
The word for day, in Netherlands,
Dag.
And in Flanders,
Dag.
Another difference. Final t sounds are often dropped in Flemish, like
Niet.
instead of,
Niet.
meaning not,
Da.
instead of,
Dat.
meaning that,
Wa.
instead of,
Wat.
meaning what, etc. I don't know, in Netherlands,
Ik weet het niet.
and in Flanders.
Ik weet het niet.
Notice the final t that is dropped. This also happens with h sounds, h, and the pronoun ik is often shortened to k. Here's another sentence meaning that doesn't work. Literally, that goes not. In Netherlands,
Dat gaat niet.
and in Flanders.
Dat gaat niet.
Notice that the final t of each word can be dropped in Flemish speech. When words like
Dat.
and
Wat.
introduce a subordinate clause, they can contract with the subject pronoun that follows, especially ik, dak, wak. People always think that I'm German. In the Netherlands,
Mensen denken altijd dat ik een Duitser ben.
and in Flanders.
Mensen denken altijd dat ik een Duitser ben.
Grammar. Another standout feature of Flemish speech is the use of the singular you pronoun
Gij. Ge.
rather than
Jij, je,
And in Flemish speech, you'll hear the second person singular pronoun.
U.
In Standard Dutch, this is a formal subject and object pronoun, while in Flemish it's informal, but is used mainly as an object pronoun, not as a subject pronoun. This pronoun is still used in the Netherlands, but sounds very formal. There's also a slight difference in conjugation between
jij,
and.
Gij.
In Standard Dutch, the final t of the second singular present tense conjugation is dropped when the pronoun comes after it. In a question, for example, in Standard Dutch, you speak Dutch is,
je spreekt Nederlands.
and as a question,
Spreek je Nederlands?
do you speak Dutch? But in Flemish, the t isn't dropped.
Je spreekt Nederlands. Spreek je Nederlands?
Also, for the second person plural, in Standard Dutch, the standard plural conjugation is used, while in Flemish, the singular conjugation is used. You speak Dutch well.
Jullie spreken goed Nederlands.
Jelle spreekt goed Nederlands.
Another difference in subject pronouns is that in Flemish, they're often doubled. I'm going. In the Netherlands,
Ik ga.
and in Flanders,
Ik ga ik.
I think that I'm going.
Ik denk dat ik ga.
And in Flanders,
Ik denk dat ik ga.
the pronoun ik doesn't have an unstressed form, but with other pronouns, it's usually an unstressed form plus the stressed form. She's staying here. In Netherlands,
Ze blijft hier.
and in Flanders.
Ze blijft zij hier.
Sometimes pronouns can even be repeated 3 times. This sentence means I don't speak Dutch, or I don't speak any Dutch. In the Netherlands it's,
Ik spreek geen Nederlands.
and in Flanders it's.
Ik klappe ik geen Nederlands.
First, the verb in this sentence is,
Klappen.
which in Standard Dutch means to clap or to fold, but in Flanders it can be used with the meaning of speak. Second, notice that the first person singular pronoun appears in this sentence 3 times. Gender. Historically in Dutch there were 3 genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter. In the Netherlands for the most part, nouns no longer have a distinction between masculine and feminine gender. They've merged, so now there are just 2 classes of nouns, common gender and neuter. There's just one singular indefinite article for all nouns.
Eén.
For example,
Eén man. Eén vrouw.
Eén huis.
in Southern Dutch and Flemish though there are still 3 genders. The indefinite article for singular masculine nouns is,
Ne.
while for feminine it's,
Een.
and for neuter it's.
Een man. Een vrouw. Een huis.
Another difference in grammar is that Flemish dialects and Tussentaal often have an extra dat after another word that introduces a subordinate clause. We don't know where he lives. In the Netherlands,
We weten niet waar hij woont.
word for word it's, we know not where he lives. And in Flanders,
We weten niet waar dat hij woont.
word for word it's, we know not where that he lives.
We weten niet waar dat hij woont.
Tell me what you think. In the Netherlands,
Vertel me wat je denkt.
word for word, tell me what you think. And in Flanders,
Vertel me wat dat je denkt.
word for word, tell me what that you think. Vocabulary. One of the biggest differences between Dutch and Flemish is the significant amount of different vocabulary, and in many cases different word preference. While the Dutch of either nation is generally mutually intelligible with the other, these differences in vocabulary might result in some temporary confusion, or at least sound a little funny to speakers from the other country. The most dangerous case might be this word. In the Netherlands, the word
Poepen.
means to defecate, in other words, to poop.
Poepen.
In Flanders, it often means to have sex. Yeah. Some words for members of the family are different. In the Netherlands, if you're an adult speaking and you want to say my father and my mother, you say
Mijn vader.
and.
Mijn moeder.
In Flanders, you might say
Mijn papa.
and.
Mijn mama.
In the Netherlands, this sounds like something a child would say. Then there's the word for uncle. In the Netherlands, it's.
Oom.
In Flanders, it's.
Nonkel.
The word for brother-in-law. In the Netherlands,
Zwager.
and in Flanders.
Schoonbroer.
Then there's the question word meaning why. In the Netherlands, it's.
Waarom?
While in Flanders, you'll likely hear,
Voor wat?
which literally means for what. The words for some foods are different. For example, in the Netherlands, the word for ham is.
Ham.
In Flanders, it's.
Hesp.
In the Netherlands, the word for French fries or chips is.
Patat.
In Flanders, it's.
Frieten.
In the Netherlands, the word meaning to walk is.
Lopen.
In Flanders, the word
Lopen.
means to run. The word for run in the Netherlands is.
Rennen.
And to run for sport is...
hardlopen,
From what I understand, this word sounds pretty weird to Flemish speakers. So if lopen means to run in Flemish, then how do they say to walk? Well, they would likely use the word
Stappen.
another word for walk, as in to step. In the Netherlands,
stappen,
is often used with the meaning of to go out, as in to go out drinking or partying. Speaking of partying, in the Netherlands, the word for a party is,
feest,
or for a smaller gathering, the diminutive form.
feestje,
In Flanders, a common word for party is.
Vijf.
In the Netherlands, the adjective meaning clean is.
schoon,
In Flanders,
Schoon.
this word usually means beautiful. To say beautiful in the Netherlands, you say.
mooi,
So if this word means beautiful in Flemish, then what's the word for clean? It's normally,
Proper.
which you could say is more like tidy. Hopefully you keep your room clean like I do. Well, at least I clean it right before filming. A clean room. In Netherlands.
een schone kamer,
In Flanders.
Een propere kamer.
There's a different verb meaning to clean too. In the Netherlands it's,
schoonmaken,
literally, to make clean. The typical Flemish word would be.
Kuisen.
If your room is clean and tidy, then that puts you in the right headspace to study. In the Netherlands, the usual verb meaning to study is.
studeren,
In Flanders it's.
Blokken.
proost,
School.
In Netherlands, a cup is normally called a.
kop,
Or.
kopje,
In Flanders, it's normally called a.
Tas.
In the Netherlands, this word would mean bag. One type of bag you probably have around the house is a suitcase. Like I've got this one right here. This big one. In the Netherlands, the usual word for suitcase is.
koffer,
In Flanders, the usual word is.
Valies.
This comes from the French word valise. Because French is also an official language of Belgium and is the native language of almost 40% of its population, not to mention a second language of many Flemish speakers, Flemish has many more French loanwords than the Dutch spoken in the Netherlands does. Some of these words are nouns, like the word for bicycle. In Flanders it's,
Velo.
while in the Netherlands it's,
fiets,
the word for heating. In Flanders it's,
Chauffage.
while in the Netherlands it's,
verwarming,
the word for floor. In Flanders it's,
Etage.
while in the Netherlands it's,
verdieping,
the word for trailer. In Flanders it's,
Remorque.
while in the Netherlands it's,
aanhangwagen,
the word for newspaper. In Flanders it's,
Gazette.
while in the Netherlands it's.
krant,
Flemish has some other French words that are greetings and other interjections,
Merci.
meaning thank you, instead of,
bedankt,
Allez.
which means go in French. This can be used in a few different contexts, like when you're trying to recall something that slipped your mind, or when something's hard to believe, like get out of here or come on in English,
Tiens.
which means hold in French. This is used when you need to interject that you're wondering about something. Like in English, I might say hold on or wait, as in, wait, aren't you supposed to be at school today?
Voilà. Voilà.
Like there, or alright, or voila, indicating that something's complete.
Swat.
Which is something you can say to bring an issue to a conclusion, like alright, it's settled, or just alright. There are also some differences in expressions in the Netherlands and Flanders. Some differences are slight. For example, there's an expression meaning surely or definitely. In the Netherlands it's,
vast en zeker,
literally, fixed and certain. In Flanders it's typically,
Zeker en vast.
certain and fixed. But in colloquial speech in both countries, it's commonly just,
zeker,
or for extra certainty.
zeker weten,
Some differences are a little more significant. In the Netherlands, the expression meaning I love you is,
ik hou van je,
literally, I hold of you, or I hold you. In Flanders, you're more likely to hear,
Ik zie u graag.
word for word, it's, I see you gladly. In the Netherlands, this is interpreted literally as, I like to see you. So we've looked at some of the differences between Dutch and the Tussentaal of Flanders. But what about Flemish dialects? Well, the person speaking Flemish in this video is from a village in the eastern part of the province of Flemish Brabant. Let's see some examples from his dialect, to illustrate how the local dialects are different from Standard Dutch and from Tussentaal. But keep in mind that this is just one dialect of many. Let's look at a sentence meaning, I would have loved to see you one last time. First, in the Netherlands, and more broadly in Standard Dutch, it would be,
ik had je graag nog een laatste keer gezien,
word for word, it's, I had you gladly yet a last time seen. Here's the dialectal example.
Ik ga ook partij jij een laatste keer gezien.
Word for word it translates exactly the same, but you can see that there are some differences. The personal pronoun meaning I is ich rather than ik. The verb meaning had is ha rather than hot. The object pronoun meaning you is rather than je. These two pronouns are similar to those in some Limburgish dialects, since the speaker's hometown is in a part of Flemish Brabant that's not too far from the province of Limburg. The word for yet is different. This one, pourtant, comes from French pourtant, and has more of a contrastive meaning like however. Also notice the different word order. Next, notice the word meaning gladly or with pleasure is different. Next, notice the different indefinite article in the dialectal example. This is the same masculine singular indefinite article that we saw in Tussentaal. And we can see that these two words are cognates of the standard ones, but are pronounced and spelled a little differently. Remember that there are lots of dialects in the Netherlands too, so comparing a Flemish dialect to standard Dutch as it's spoken in the Netherlands isn't that meaningful. That's why I've spent most of the video focusing on Tussentaal, since it's a semi-standard way of speaking that crosses regional and dialectal boundaries in the way that standard Dutch does in the Netherlands. So here's an equivalent of the sentence in Tussentaal for comparison.
Ik had u nogthans graag een laatste keer gezien.
You can see that the Tussentaal example is closer to standard Dutch than the dialectal example, but still has a few differences, like the shortened form of the pronoun meaning I, k, rather than ik. And here we see again that the pronoun u is used, even though the sentence is obviously said to someone the speaker knows well. Remember that in Tussentaal, this is an informal and familiar pronoun, while in standard Dutch and in the Netherlands it's very formal. Then there's the word for yet or however. This word has a more contrastive meaning than the standard word, similar to the word used in dialect. Then there's the different masculine indefinite article again. So, you've seen that there are some differences between the way the Dutch language is spoken in the Netherlands and in Flanders. Enough of a difference to create a little bit of confusion or amusement for speakers from the other country. But at the end of the day, the people in both countries speak Dutch, and in both countries they use both standard Dutch and dialects. The main distinction is that Flemish people use Tussentaal, the semi-standard, informal way of speaking that isn't quite dialect and isn't quite standard. In the Netherlands too, dialects are fading more and more with each generation, but they're being replaced not by an in-between language, but more by the standard language. At least that's how it looks to me as an outsider. If you're a native speaker and you disagree, let me know in the comments down below. If you're a native speaker of Dutch from either the Netherlands or Belgium, do you have any trouble communicating with people from the other country? Are there moments of confusion? And to other people, what's your impression of the differences between Dutch Dutch and Flemish Dutch? Do they seem like a big deal? And once again, it's time to give a big shout out to all of the Langfocus Patreon supporters. The top tier Patreon supporters are the ones whose names you see right here on the screen. So let's give them a big round of applause. Your support on Patreon helps make content like this possible. You can help support this channel too at patreon.com/Langfocus. If you liked this video, then you might also like my video from a few years ago comparing the Dutch language with the German language. And you might also like my original language profile on the Dutch language. It's pretty ancient, but hey, feel free to laugh at how bad my videos used to be.